After 2 days of Russian missile strikes against civilian targets across Ukraine, let me start with a personal question. How are you feeling, and where is your family?
Leyla, hello, and hello everyone. I wish I would be there in the room with you. That would make contact definitely much easier. But I am here thousands of miles away in Kigali, representing Ukraine, but also representing women parliamentarians, because in the Inter-Parliamentary Union I have a specific role of chairing, being the president of the Bureau of Women Parliamentarians of these 178 parliaments. It is a big role, but it has become even more difficult over this week, because at this time I had to deal with the Monday and the Tuesday attacks on Ukraine. My children are out of the country, thank God for that, because I don't know what I would have done, probably gone absolutely mad and jumped on the plane and got out to Ukraine as soon as possible, because one of those missiles that hit Kiev, it hit the playground where normally my children would have been playing on their way to school on that Monday morning. So at the same time, my 2 days here were balanced. Well, not balanced, balanced is the wrong word, were off balance for a long time now, but were spread between calling friends, family, my parents who are still in Kiev, making sure that everyone is okay, making sure that everyone is safe, but also preparing speeches and ramming up the support from parliaments all over the world to stand with Ukraine and to do their bit to make this Russian aggression end as quickly as possible.
Thank you. And before I forget, for those of you joining us online, please pop your questions into the chat box as they occur to you, or save them for the Q&A at the end. Now, Lesia, can we go back to your family for a minute? Because I think you've got quite an interesting family situation, because it's your husband who's looking after your children outside of Ukraine. Can you tell us why that is, and what that says about
so actually
role reversals in Ukraine in times of war?
Yes, I think there's a bit something with the connection, but I hope we can do well with it. The role reversal. In my family is actually the example of gender equality at this time. It so happens that I'm a mother of 3. And when families have 3 or more children in Ukraine, the men in such families are exempt from military service. By law, they cannot be called up to the army, and if a man who is father of 3 or more children wants to go into the military, he has to go through a more or less complicated procedure, and probably I would have the military commissariat call me up and check if that was okay with me for my husband to go off to fight. But it also so happens that in my situation, me being the member of parliament, an active member of parliament, I have a duty to my country and to my people, to the people that I represent. So for most of my time, I have to be in Ukraine, I have to be in parliament, which is still active, operating, and I have to be voting. So there's no way that I can take my children to safety abroad and stay with them there for as long as need be, and take care of the household, take care of the school, take care of the medical, as I would normally do, balancing it with the normal work routine. So at this point in time, I am lucky, because the father of my children was able to take on this role of principal carer for the kids and take them to safety and keep them in safety. Many women in the parliament, they do not have such a luxury, because they have 1 child or 2 children, and their husbands are either fighting the war or cannot, or doing some other kind of efforts to help the defense and security efforts in Ukraine, and they cannot leave. So the mothers are left with the dilemma of either handing in their mandate or taking care of their children. Thank God that so far there has not been a single woman in parliament who has handed in the mandate. We all stand with our people today, and thank God that all of these women have a support network from their close friends, from their family, who are able to take care of their kids and take them to safety. And one more point that I want to reiterate why it is so important and why we emphasize on the safety of the children of the parliamentarians is because women like me, and actually the male colleagues in parliament as well, we are all on Russia's kill lists. We have known this since day one. The Russian army was carrying kill lists with all of the members of the parliament. Some of these lists were marked. Some of the names were marked with a star for designated to be taken to Moscow for further interrogations, or designated to be taken to torture chambers. Now, depending on how active the members of parliament are, and of course, being ourselves the target, our families automatically became the target of the Russian army as well. So since day one, it was imperative that we did all possible, first of all, to protect ourselves, to wake up every morning alive and able to fight for Ukraine, and second of all, to do every single bit possible to fight for Ukraine.
Thanks, Lesia. It could be said that Ukraine is supported by the West and not the rest. What is your assessment, talking to parliamentarians from around the world this week in Kigali?
It's a good question, especially since I'm here on the African continent in Rwanda. This afternoon, we will be debating on an emergency item resolution condemning Russia's annexation of Ukrainian territories and the atrocities Russia is committing in Ukraine. And that emergency item has been proposed by Chile and supported by the Latin American group of countries, which in itself speaks about how global the effects of Russian aggression really are. When it comes to the countries from the Arab world and the African continent, the opinions are, of course, divided. What that leads me to conclude is that we have to do more. We in Ukraine, but also the Western world, needs to do more to get the global South on board with pushing back on Russia's imperialistic ambitions, and on board with doing their bit for the world to become a more stable, more peaceful, more secure place. Because at the end of the day, they'll be contributing to for their own interests to be taken care of. The Ukraine is a major food supplier. A lot of the African countries and countries in the Middle East depend almost entirely on Ukraine alone for the grain supplies. And as long as this war continues, there continues to be a risk of famine coming back to the African continent. We are in the 21st century, I'd like to remind everyone. And this is not the issue we should be going back to. We should be talking about stability, economic development, improvement of living conditions. Instead of that, this war is taking us steps back on topics like gender equality, climate change, economic development of many countries across the world. Now, we can go back to all of these topics and to living our lives and trying to make our lives more comfortable and better as soon as Russia's aggression stops. And it will stop when Putin is made to stop, and that when victory of Ukraine is fixed and final.
Thank you, Lesia. We read in the FT today that NATO is scrambling to secure more air defenses for Ukraine. But if Russia were to deploy nuclear or chemical weapons, what would you want the West to do?
We need to know that the West is ready to react, not just in words, not just talking the talk, but actually walking the walk. And we need to know that there is the resources to react in the case of a nuclear attack, of a chemical attack, and a biological attack. The world has been living for decades as this carefree, relatively safe place, not thinking that nuclear is possible, not thinking that any leader in their right mind might be actually close to deploying chemical and biological weapons. But this is the reality. This is the reality of living with Russia under Putin. And until this reality lasts, until Putin remains in power and the Russian soldiers roam Ukrainian land, the West, as Ukraine, need to be prepared, need to have all the necessary weapons, resources, all the necessary shelters in place and ready in case such attacks become a reality.
What is the road to that outcome you're describing?
Well, first of all, there needs to be a review of defense spending in the Pentagon and in all the other defense institutions.
To interrupt, what is the road to peace? That's what I'm asking for. Is there any scope for backdoor diplomacy, exploring the ground? How do you get to the situation where Putin is stopped and Russia, maybe the other people behind him, are stopped?
There is no other way than to physically push the Russian army out of the territory of Ukraine. And there is no other way than the global nations standing united on pushing for a sanctions Rammstein, because the sanctions against Russia, they need to go on until all those responsible for war crimes and crimes against humanity are brought to justice, and until Russia pays out the reparations to Ukraine and to the world, to the other countries in the world who have been investing in Ukraine's and their own defense and security through these 8 years, and especially through these 231 days of escalated Russian aggression. Now, when I talk about justice, criminals being brought to justice and reparations, I don't say about this in the terms of revenge or avenging any of those thousands of Ukrainians killed and injured for life. I am talking about this in the context of making sure there is a non-repetition of aggression coming from Russia, and that the phrase we all love and cherish so much, never again, really starts meaning exactly that, never again. And for that to happen, apart from criminals being brought to justice, apart from reparations being paid, Russia needs to be made incapable of starting another war. That means demilitarization, denuclearization, and essentially a deputinization. And when I say deputinization, it's not just about removing Putin, it's removing his legacy, the legislative system he put in place, which just completely quashes down all human rights and liberties, which has destroyed freedom of speech in Russia. All that has to go in order for Russia to be a safe neighbor, a safe international partner.
Thank you, Lesia. What kind of discussions are emerging in Ukraine's parliament about the kind of country you want to see after the war? And I guess the corollary to that is, how is Ukraine going to avoid returning to the corruption and the squabbling that characterized it before this war, brought you all together and surprised the world?
I will answer this question by giving you some very recent statistics from surveys carried out across Ukraine. So at this point in time, 96% of Ukrainians believe that Ukraine must do all possible to remain a democracy and value democracy beyond all other values. 86% of Ukrainians support Ukraine's accession into the EU and becoming a fully fledged EU member, and 83% of Ukrainians want Ukraine to become member of NATO. Now, this says a lot about our aspirations as a country, as a nation. That means that we would like to continue building and rebuilding Ukraine as a country where values such as freedom, human rights, liberties, equality, where they mean something. And I just hope very much that as we stand in unity fighting against Russia's aggression, we will remain in unity until Ukraine is rebuilt, bigger, stronger, and with the plague of military threats, Russia's aggression will also go the plagues that have been around in Ukraine for decades before, such as the corruption you mentioned.
Thank you, Lesia. How do you see your own role in a post-war Ukraine?
I hope that I can do my bit in the rebuilding, but being an international lawyer by trade, I hope very much to be able to contribute on the framework of the reparations that Russia is to pay, and on the long road we have to make sure that all the international criminals are brought to justice. This is how I see myself personally in the short term. In the long term, I hope that I can serve my people well and represent them through the years to come, when Ukraine will be rebuilt as a stronger nation, stronger democratic nation and free nation.
Thank you. Remember, it's going to be your turn to ask questions in 4 minutes, I reckon. So in the meantime, Lesia, can you tell us a little bit more about what is the sentiment in Donbass and Luhansk, the areas that have recently been annexed by Russia, even though it doesn't control the areas that it's annexed completely? Which way are they leaning these days when it comes to Russia?
It's difficult because the first thing that Russia does when it occupies any territory is they try to limit any kind of contact with Ukraine, or for that matter with the outside world. And it becomes dangerous for the people who are living under Russian occupation to actually speak freely of what is going on there and what is their mind. At the same time, having said that, these people living under Russian occupation, they are so strong, they are so resilient. Their confidence is just awe-inspiring about how they still remain strong and fight back against the aggression. And my role as a parliamentarian is to make sure that they know of the support that the international community is providing them, but also that our government and our military does all the possible they can to free these people from the Russian occupation and from all the atrocities and crimes and violence that it brings with it.
Thank you. And if we can go back to ending the war, the scenario you're describing seems a little bit far-fetched, at least from where we're sitting now, since Putin has made it absolutely clear that losing for him is not an option. What is the thing that's going to change and secure the outcome that you want?
There needs to be a unity among all of the international community. Like there is a unity between 53 ministries of defense of 53 different countries right now to stand with Ukraine and assist Ukraine militarily and strengthen Ukraine militarily. There must be a similar unity from even more governments on the sanctions and on the bringing Russia to responsibility, because we all must approach this case as one where victory means not Russian soldiers just leaving the territory of Ukraine. No, that will be just the beginning of victory. And then we need the never again part, the guarantee of non-repetition. Actually, speaking as an international lawyer, I can tell you that there is sanctions for the crime of aggression, and for the crime of aggression to be considered a stop, the aggression itself has to stop, but then the country who was committing aggression needs to find some kind of form of guaranteeing the non-repetition. And that guarantee of non-repetition is usually written out in a peace agreement. But that peace agreement will be signed by Russia, whoever it is led by, that's a slightly different question, by Ukraine and all of Ukraine's allies. And it's up to Ukraine and the allies to unite their efforts to actually draft out the terms of this peace agreement on democracy's terms, and also to make sure that Russia abides and obliges to comply every single provision to it. And I hear your point that it seems far-fetched. I actually hear this point not just from you, but on various platforms. But what I liked listening in on to the previous panel that was just holding place before this is the phrase that the road to yes is paved with dozens of no's. And Ukraine knows this very well, because when we were asking back in January for NLAWs and HIMARS, we were looked on like crazy people, and we were told, no, you're not going to get them. This is mad. We do not want to escalate. We do not want to anger Russia. And here we are with all these long-range sophisticated weapons now, and all these countries thinking what else they can get us, and actually considering giving Ukraine fighter jets. And the same will be and is the case with this process of getting the international community fully aware and united around the concept of making Russia and Russians bear full responsibility for the crime of aggression and all the other crimes stemming from it as an element of the never again that is so crucial for our world to have long-standing peace.
Thank you for that, Lesia. And now I'd like to bring in our audience. I don't see any questions from our online audience, so have we got any questions in the room? If not, I'll keep going. Lady over there? Yes. I think there's a microphone.
Hello. First of all, it's an honor to, quote unquote, meet you and to be able to ask this question. It feels a bit slightly off topic because I'd like to go back to what you were saying about you being an example of gender equality, because your husband was exempted from enlisting because of 3 children. Now I myself am from Eastern Europe, I'm Romanian, and living in the UK for a few years now, I think it strikes me how different the perception of gender equality is in Eastern Europe versus the West. And I wanted to get your thought a little bit, given that you're an international lawyer and that you've been exposed to, the ways of working in the West. How far do you think Eastern Europe still has to come in terms of gender equality? And how do you think the conversations would have to be in Eastern Europe so that people there can empathize? Because I think because of the historical context, I'm yapping on. I'll stop now.
Yep. Okay, Lesia, your view.
I know exactly the roots of this question, and I really hope that one of the outcomes after Ukraine rebuilds will be more gender equality and a different perception as to the roles of women. Because just like there was a switch in my family, and by the way, here I have to say a huge thank you to my husband for not once asking any extra questions, and it just happened very smoothly. There was no discussion about it. It was just a natural thing to do, to step up in a partnership, which I believe marriage to be, and take on the role which is needed from you in this particular situation. And I see more and more families, at least in Ukraine, through this difficult period where this has been the case. I also see families where women have gone to the front lines and where women have enlisted with territorial defense units, with military units, just because they know they can, because they have the necessary skills, because they have that energy inside them which drives this particular need to help their country in this particular aspect, hands-on on the front lines. And the men in their families have been okay with it. And these women are fighting shoulder to shoulder with the men on the front lines, doing their jobs really well. We actually have a number of women who have earned their place as company leaders and battalion leaders, which is amazing. 15% of the Ukrainian army are women. Now, I cannot give you this in exact numbers because that is classified information, but believe me, it's a lot. We're talking about dozens of thousands of women. So coming out from this, I hope that our society will become an example for other Eastern European countries, that really the role of the man and the role of the woman can be anything that that particular person aspires to be. And it's about respect of those wishes and those abilities, skills and capabilities. And it's about building stronger societies together, applying the skills that you have to where you are most needed at that certain time, regardless of what sex you were born with.
Thank you, Lesia. Next question. Lady over there. She's an... in front.
Hello, my name is Natalia Mykolska, and I'm also Ukrainian. I'm here thanks to Lesia. And I have a bit different story.
Sorry, can we have a question, please? No story.
Yeah, I was a businesswoman in Ukraine, and now I'm a temporarily, actually, refugee in UK. And my question for all of you is, and actually it's not a question, it's just an ask. Look around. There are a lot of top-level former Ukrainian businesswomen or mid-level around you. Just help them. They don't need any money. They don't need any financial assistance. They just need your networks. They just need a job. And they just need a help because they are de facto single mom.
Thank you.
And that's it.
That's a great point. Now, there's another lady at the same table in front. Yes, thank you.
So you've raised 3 children, you've built a career in law and politics, you're living through war, you talked earlier about being on Russia's kill list. Very simple question, what keeps you going?
Good question.
I don't know is the very honest answer, because to be honest, in these 231 days, I have not had the chance to sit down, take a breather and think about what is all of this and where are we. I'm just going, like millions of Ukrainians around me. And I would like to acknowledge Natalia Mykolska, who has just spoken. Every single Ukrainian has a different story. And each story is a story of strength and resilience and of just going, because you have to go for your family, for your children, for your country. It's as if we all took in a big breath on that 24th of February, on that morning, and we're not exhaling yet. We're still running. I would love to go back and answer this question, what keeps you going after this is all over, after we have victory? And I guess having said all this, what keeps me going is the vision of Ukraine, where there's no Russian soldiers, where there's no Russian landmines, explosives in the field, a Ukraine that is safe for my children to go back to because missiles are not flying and airports are open and civilian aviation is back, and of having the confidence to tell all 3 of my children that you are free to choose your life in your free and safe Ukraine.
Thank you, Lesia. We have time for just one more quick question. If not, there's a lady at the back. Thank you.
Lesia, really great to hear from you. We spoke a lot today about leadership and really good qualities of leadership. Can I ask for your thoughts on the leadership qualities you see coming from your president, who we all admire greatly?
He stood with Ukraine. He stood with the people of Ukraine, and he stood with the government, the parliament, the military. He has become the inspiration. His phrase, I don't need a taxi, I just need weapons, is what keeps the whole nation united and going and fighting. And I'm from an opposition party, by the way, so I'm being completely unbiased here. My opinion of President Zelensky changed 180 degrees on that 24th of February. And I think we Ukrainians are very lucky to have a leader who has taken on the responsibility to lead at this difficult time. And also his wife, the First Lady, Olena Zelenska, her role in all of this is just huge. She has been, again, an inspiration and a pillar of strength for the many women out there living their stories at the time of war and trying to live at the time of war.
Well, thank you so much, Lesia. From everything I've heard today, I think female power is also going to be an important ingredient in the success of a post-war Ukraine along the lines you've described today. So I'd like us all to thank Lesia and thank you for your questions and your participation.